Emma Martinez had mastered the art of living quietly. To anyone visiting her small flower shop in the sleepy town of Mariposa, California, she was just another grieving widow trying to keep her late husband's memory alive through the business. They had built together. Few would guess that behind her gentle smile and soft-spoken nature lay a woman who had absorbed every combat lesson her Marine husband had taught her during their 15 years of marriage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows through the shop's front windows as Emma arranged a bouquet of white lilies, her movements precise and deliberate. The familiar scent of fresh flowers filled the air, mixing with the earthy aroma of potted plants that lined the worn wooden shelves. Martinez Flowers and Gifts had been their dream, hers and Michael's, a peaceful haven they'd created after his retirement from the Marines. Now, 3 years after his death, it was her sanctuary, a place where she could feel close to him while building something of her own. The shop was more than just a business. It was a testament to their love story. Photos of Michael in his marine dress blues adorned the walls, alongside pressed flowers from their wedding day. Customers often asked about him, and Emma would share stories of the decorated Force Recon Marine who had traded his rifle for roses, finding peace in helping his wife create beautiful arrangements for the community they'd chosen to call home. What those customers didn't know was that Michael had taught her more than just how to run a business. During their marriage, he had insisted on teaching her everything he knew about survival and self-defense. "The world isn't always kind to widows," he'd told her, as if somehow knowing she would need these skills one day. Emma had humored him then, learning how to shoot, how to defend herself, how to think tactically in dangerous situations. She'd absorbed every lesson, never truly believing she'd need to use them. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Emma from her thoughts. She looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Henderson picking up her weekly arrangement. Instead, 3 men entered, their expensive suits and gold jewelry out of place in her modest shop. The leader, a tall man with a facial scar that pulled at his upper lip, surveyed the space with cold, calculating eyes. "Beautiful shop you have here, Senora," he said, his accent thick with false courtesy. "I am Diego Ramirez. My associates and I represent certain business interests in this area." He ran his fingers along a delicate orchid display, his heavy rings scraping against the ceramic pot. Emma's hands stilled on the lilies, her mind instantly recalling Michael's voice. "Always be aware of your surroundings. Notice the exits, the potential weapons, the way people carry themselves." She could see the bulge of concealed weapons beneath their jackets, the way they positioned themselves between her and the door. "Thank you," she replied carefully, her voice steady despite the warning bells ringing in her head. "How can I help you today?" Diego smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're here to discuss business, Senora Martinez. You see, this town is changing. Small businesses like yours need protection in these uncertain times. For a reasonable monthly fee, we can ensure nothing unfortunate happens to your lovely shop." Emma's fingers brushed against the stem cutters in her apron pocket. Michael had always said anything could be a weapon if you knew how to use it. "I appreciate your concern," she said, maintaining her calm demeanor, "but I don't need any protection. This is a safe town." Diego's smile faded. He moved closer to the counter, his presence looming over her. "Perhaps you don't understand. Senora, this isn't a request. The cartel is expanding its operations, and every business in this territory will contribute. Those who refuse—" He picked up a glass vase, examining it in the sunlight before letting it slip from his fingers. It shattered on the floor, sending shards of glass skittering across the wooden boards. Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on Diego, remembering Michael's words. "Fear is natural, but control it. Use it. Let it sharpen your focus instead of clouding it." She could almost feel Michael's presence beside her, steady and strong as she had felt it countless times during their training sessions. "I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider," Diego said, stepping back from the counter. "My associates will return for your first payment. Do not disappoint us, Senora Martinez. Widows should be particularly careful about making enemies." As they turned to leave, Emma's hand tightened around the stem cutters. She watched them go, her mind already racing through the defensive preparations Michael had drilled into her. The cartel had made a crucial mistake. They saw only a widow, a woman alone. They didn't realize that Michael Martinez had left behind more than just memories. He had left his legacy of strength, training, and tactical knowledge in the hands of a woman who had learned far more than just how to arrange flowers. The moment the cartel members left, Emma locked the front door and flipped the closed sign. Her hands remained steady as she swept up the shattered glass, each piece a reminder of the threat that now loomed over her peaceful life. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows through the shop's windows, but Emma's day was far from over. She had preparations to make. In the back room of the flower shop, behind a false panel in the storage closet, lay a heavy metal trunk. Michael had insisted on its installation before his death, and Emma had never fully understood why until now. She pulled it out, her fingers running over the biometric lock that responded to her touch with a soft click. Inside was everything Michael had wanted her to have, just in case. Weapons, tactical gear, and a detailed notebook filled with his precise military handwriting. "Always have a fallback position," his written words reminded her as she flipped through the pages. "The enemy expects you to be vulnerable at home, so make it your strength." Emma had memorized every word in this notebook during the lonely nights after his death, finding comfort in his guidance even then. Now those words took on a new meaning. She began her preparations methodically, just as Michael had taught her. First, she checked the security cameras he had installed, tiny, almost invisible devices that covered every angle of the shop. Next, she retrieved the Glock 19 from its hidden compartment, the weapon familiar in her hands from countless hours. At the range with Michael, "A gun is just a tool," he'd said. "It's your mind that makes it effective." Emma worked through the night, setting up subtle defensive positions throughout the shop. She moved display tables to create better cover, installed tripwires in strategic locations, and prepared several of Michael's special surprises, non-lethal but highly effective deterrents that could give her the advantage she needed. The flower shop was transforming into a fortress, though none of her regular customers would notice the difference. As she worked, memories of Michael's training sessions flooded back. He had always been patient but insistent, making her run through scenarios until her responses became instinct. "The first rule of combat is to avoid it if possible," he told her. "But if you can't avoid it, you make damn sure you're prepared to win it." Around midnight, Emma heard a vehicle slow down outside the shop. She moved silently to the surveillance monitor, watching as a black SUV cruised past, its occupants clearly scanning the building. They were already watching her, assessing her routines, looking for weaknesses. Michael had warned her about this too. The most dangerous predators study their prey before they strike. She used their surveillance against them, deliberately maintaining her normal routine while secretly preparing for the confrontation she knew was coming. During the day, she served her regular customers, arranged flowers, and played the role of the harmless widow perfectly. But each night she trained, running through the combat drills Michael had taught her until her muscles ached. In her apartment, above the shop, Emma pulled out an old photo album. There was Michael in his dress blues, standing proud at their wedding. Another showed him teaching her to shoot, his hands positioning her arms just right, his face serious but loving. The last photo was taken just months before his death, both of them smiling in front of the newly opened flower shop, his arm protectively around her shoulders. "I wish you were here," she whispered to his image, her fingers tracing his face. "But you prepared me for this, didn't you? You knew someday I might have to fight." The weight of his dog tags against her chest felt heavier than usual, a constant reminder of his strength, his lessons, his love. A text message lit up her phone. Diego's associates would return tomorrow for their first payment. Emma took a deep breath, centering herself as Michael had taught her. She knew she could run, disappear as he had shown her how. But this shop was more than just a business. It was their dream, their legacy. Michael had fought for their country. Now she would fight for what they had built together. She spent the rest of the night reviewing Michael's combat notes, practicing the moves he had drilled into her, and finalizing her preparations. The cartel was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their targets. They saw a vulnerable widow, but Emma Martinez was far more than that. She was the student and wife of a Force Recon Marine, and she had learned her lessons well. As dawn approached, Emma stood in the middle of her shop, surrounded by the flowers she loved and the defenses she had prepared. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. She touched Michael's dog tags one last time, drawing strength from them. "Time to make you proud, my love," she whispered. The cartel thought they were dealing with a simple widow. Tomorrow they would discover just how wrong they were. Morning arrived with a heavy fog rolling through the streets of Mariposa, shrouding the town in a ghostly haze. Emma opened her shop at exactly 8 a.m., just as she did every day. She moved through her morning routine with practiced precision, watering the plants, checking new deliveries, and preparing the day's arrangements. But today, each movement had a dual purpose, each position carefully chosen. The security cameras showed 3 black SUVs approaching just before noon. They parked in a deliberate pattern, one in front of the shop, one in the alley behind, and one across the street. Emma counted 7 men in total, including Diego. They were heavily armed, no longer bothering to conceal their weapons. This wasn't just about collecting payment. They were here to make an example of her. When outnumbered, use their confidence against them. Michael's voice echoed in her memory. Overconfident enemies make mistakes. Emma positioned herself behind the counter, her hands steady as she arranged a bouquet of red roses. The stem cutters lay within easy reach, and beneath the counter the Glock was secured in its hidden holster. The bell chimed as Diego entered. You first, flanked by 2 of his men. The others remained outside, watching the street. Diego's scarred face twisted into a cruel smile as he approached the counter. "Good morning, Senora Martinez. I trust you've had time to reconsider our generous offer." Emma looked up from her roses, her expression carefully neutral. "I have," she replied calmly. "The answer is still no." She could see the muscle in Diego's jaw tighten, his pretense of civility cracking. "Perhaps I wasn't clear yesterday," he snarled, his accent thickening with anger. "This isn't a negotiation. You either pay for our protection or we destroy everything you have." He nodded to one of his men, who began knocking over flower displays, sending vases crashing to the floor. Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on Diego, watching for the telltale signs Michael had taught her to recognize. The slight shift in weight that preceded an attack, the tensing of shoulders before reaching for a weapon. "I understand perfectly," she said, "but I think you're the one who needs clarity. This shop is off limits." Diego laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the shop. "You stupid woman. You think because your dead Marine taught you to shoot a gun, you can stand against the cartel." He reached across the counter, grabbing her arm. "We know all about your husband. He's not here to protect you anymore." In that instant, Emma moved. Michael's training took over, muscle memory replacing conscious thought. She twisted her arm free, using a technique Michael had drilled into her countless times, simultaneously grabbing the stem cutters with her other hand. The sharp blade sliced through the air where Diego's hand had been a split second before. The cartel leader jerked back, surprise replacing his arrogance. His men reached for their weapons, but Emma was already in motion. She kicked the hidden lever beneath the counter, triggering one of Michael's surprises. The overhead sprinklers activated, but instead of water, they released a military-grade pepper spray mixture. The cartel members staggered, coughing and cursing as the irritant filled the air. Emma had already pulled on the protective mask she'd concealed under the counter. Through the chaos, she moved with purpose, just as Michael had trained her. The first guard went down with a precise strike to the throat, his gun clattering uselessly. To the floor. The second tried to aim his weapon through streaming eyes, but Emma was too close, too fast. A series of quick strikes, elbow to the solar plexus, knee to the groin, palm to the nose, and he crumpled. Diego, partially protected by his position near the door, managed to draw his pistol, but Emma had anticipated this. She kicked another hidden switch, and the display shelf behind him toppled forward. He dove to avoid it, losing his grip on the weapon. Emma was on him in an instant, driving her knee into his back and securing his arms in a submission hold Michael had taught her. "My husband didn't just teach me to shoot," she hissed in his ear, applying pressure to make him gasp. "He taught me everything he knew about combat, about surviving, about protecting what's mine." She could hear the remaining cartel members attempting to breach the shop, but they were met with more of Michael's defensive measures, flashbangs and smoke grenades strategically placed at every entrance. From outside came the sound of cursing and confused shouting, as the cartel members discovered that their easy target was anything but defenseless. Emma maintained her hold on Diego, her voice cold and steady. "Now let me be clear. This shop, this town, they're under my protection. The next time you or your cartel comes here, I won't be so gentle." Through the dissipating pepper spray, Emma could see the fear in Diego's eyes, the same fear she had once felt when Michael first warned her about the dangers she might face. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She was her husband's legacy, a warrior in her own right, and she was just getting started. The aftermath of the confrontation left Emma's flower shop in disarray, but she remained focused. She kept Diego pinned down, aware that the next few moments would be crucial. Outside, his remaining men were regrouping, their shouts becoming more organized as they recovered from the surprise defensive measures. She could hear car doors slamming and engines starting. Some were fleeing, but others were likely circling around for another attempt. "You've made a terrible mistake," Diego spat, still struggling against her hold. "You think this is over? The cartel will burn this place to the ground. We'll destroy everything you have." Despite his threats, Emma could hear the tremor in his voice, the uncertainty that came with having his perceived power stripped away. Emma increased the pressure on his arm, using the leverage points Michael had taught her. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," she said, her voice steady and cold. "You're going to leave this town. You're going to tell your bosses that Martinez Flowers and Gifts is off limits. If you don't, I'll make sure they learn how you and your men were taken down by a widow with a flower shop." Through the shop's windows, she could see the remaining cartel members had taken cover behind their vehicles. They were hesitating, unsure whether to storm the building or retreat. Emma knew she needed to end this quickly before they could organize a coordinated attack. She reached for the zip ties she had stored beneath the counter, securing Diego's hands behind his back with practiced efficiency. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Diego growled as she pulled him to his feet. "The cartel doesn't forget. They don't forgive. They'll send others, more than you can handle." Emma marched him toward the door, keeping him positioned as a shield between her and his men outside. The morning sun had burned away the fog, leaving the street eerily clear. "No, you don't understand," Emma replied, her voice carrying across the silent street. "My husband didn't just teach me fighting techniques. He taught me strategy, intelligence gathering, counter-surveillance." She raised her voice, ensuring the men outside could hear her clearly. "For the past 24 hours, I've been recording everything, your faces, your license plates, your conversations. Right now, that information is being uploaded to multiple secure locations." She could see the impact of her words on the cartel members' faces. They exchanged uncertain glances, their weapons lowering slightly. Emma continued, "If anything happens to me or this shop, that information goes to every law enforcement agency in the country. How do you think your bosses will react when they learn that your failed shakedown of a flower shop brought that kind of heat?" Michael's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes the best weapon is the threat of exposure. Criminals fear nothing more than their secrets being revealed." She had spent the night not just preparing physical defenses, but also setting up the digital dead man's switch Michael had designed. It wouldn't stop a determined enemy, but it would make them think twice about the cost of pursuing her. One of the cartel members, a younger man with nervous eyes, lowered his weapon completely. "Diego, maybe we should—" he began, but Diego cut him off with a stream of Spanish curses. Emma recognized the shift in power dynamics that Michael had always said was crucial in any confrontation. The subordinates were beginning to question their leader's judgment. "Last chance," Emma said, her grip on Diego still firm. "Leave now, never come back, and we all walk away from this. Or test me, and find out what else my husband taught me about dealing with threats." She kept her voice level, but there was steel beneath the words. The remaining cartel members looked at each other, then at their captured leader, and finally at the woman who had single-handedly disrupted their operation. Emma watched as uncertainty turned to resignation in their eyes. One by one, they backed away toward their vehicles. She waited until they were all in their SUVs before releasing Diego with a sharp shove toward his men. He stumbled forward, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he snarled, but the threat sounded hollow now. "Yes, it is," Emma replied simply. She stood in the doorway of her shop, Michael's dog tags gleaming in the sunlight as the cartel members retreated. The SUVs pulled away one by one, leaving only tire marks on the pavement as evidence they had ever been there. Emma remained vigilant, scanning the street as Michael had taught her, until the last vehicle disappeared around the corner. Only then did she allow herself a moment to breathe, to feel the ache in her muscles and the weight of what had just transpired. She touched the dog tags gently, a gesture that had become both prayer and promise. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered, "for everything." But even as she began cleaning up the mess left behind, Emma knew this was only the beginning. The cartel wouldn't take this humiliation lightly, and she needed to be ready for what would come next. 40 miles away, in a luxurious hacienda-style mansion protected by high walls and armed guards, Alejandro Vargas sat in his leather chair, his weathered face a mask of controlled fury, as he listened to Diego's explanation of the morning's events. The cartel lieutenant's voice trembled slightly as he recounted how a simple flower shop owner had managed to humiliate his team. "So," Vargas said, his voice dangerously soft, "you're telling me that a widow, one woman, made you and your men run like scared children?" He lifted a crystal glass of aged tequila to his lips, his dark eyes never leaving Diego's face. The room smelled of expensive cigars and fear. Diego shifted uncomfortably, the bruises from Emma's hold still fresh on his body. She was prepared. Jefe, her husband, was Force Recon Marine. He trained her, left her equipment, defenses. Vargas silenced him with a sharp wave of his hand. "I don't want excuses," Vargas interrupted, setting down his glass with deliberate care. I want solutions. This woman has made us look weak. In our business, weakness invites chaos. He stood, walking to the window that overlooked his meticulously maintained gardens. Tell me about her husband, this Marine. Michael Martinez, one of Vargas's intelligence officers, spoke up, consulting a tablet. Force Recon, multiple combat deployments, highly decorated, died 3 years ago. Cancer, not combat. They opened the flower shop after his retirement. Local business, well respected in the community. Vargas nodded slowly, processing the information. And the widow? What else do we know about her? The intelligence officer swiped through several screens. Emma Martinez, age 38. No criminal record, no military background of her own. But according to our sources, her husband spent years training her. Combat techniques, tactical planning, weapons handling, everything he knew. Interesting, Vargas mused, turning back to face the room. A Marine's last gift to his wife. The ability to defend herself. There was almost admiration in his voice, quickly replaced by cold calculation. But she's made a critical mistake. She's challenged us publicly. If we let this stand, others will think they can resist. He walked to his desk, pressing an intercom button. Send in Jorge. Moments later, a tall, scarred man entered the room. Jorge El Cazador Ramirez was the cartel's specialist in dealing with particularly difficult problems. His methods were legendary for their brutality and effectiveness. I have a job for you, Vargas said to Jorge, a widow with a flower shop who thinks she can stand against us. I want you to remind her, and everyone else in that town, what happens to those who defy the cartel. Jorge's lips curved into a cruel smile as he listened to the details. Meanwhile, back in Mariposa, Emma was putting her own plans into motion. She had spent the afternoon cleaning up the shop, replacing broken vases and rearranging displays. To her regular customers, it looked like nothing more than post-delivery reorganization, but each new arrangement concealed additional weapons or defensive measures. As she worked, Emma remembered Michael's words about the aftermath of confrontation. The enemy's response will tell you everything about their next move. The bigger their ego, the harder they'll strike back. She had humiliated the cartel publicly, and she harbored no illusions about their reaction. In the back room, Emma accessed the encrypted laptop Michael had left her. She connected to the network of cameras he had helped her install throughout the neighborhood. Not just around her shop, but at strategic points covering all major approaches. The feed showed normal activity, but she knew it wouldn't last. She pulled out Michael's tactical notebook again, turning to a section marked Escalation Response. His neat handwriting detailed exactly what she needed to do next. Emma smiled softly, running her fingers over the pages. Even now, years after his death, Michael was still protecting her, guiding her. When the enemy escalates, she read, don't just react, anticipate. They'll expect fear, so show strength. They'll expect defense, so prepare offense. Most importantly, they'll expect you to be alone. Emma looked at the last line twice, understanding flooding through her. She reached for her phone, scrolling to a contact she hadn't called in years. Hello? A gruff voice answered on the third ring. Jake Stevens here. Emma took a deep breath. Jake had been Michael's closest friend in the Marines, part of the same Force Recon team. Jake, it's Emma Martinez. I need to call in that favor Michael arranged. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Jake's voice came back, serious and focused. Michael said you'd only call if it was serious. What's the situation? Emma explained quickly, laying out the morning's events and her concerns about the cartel's inevitable response. Stay put, Jake said when she finished. I'll make some calls. Michael had more friends than you know, Emma, and we take care of our own. As Emma hung up, she felt a strange mix of emotions: grief for the husband she'd lost, gratitude for his foresight, and a growing determination to face whatever came next. Night was falling over Mariposa as Emma made her final preparations. She knew the cartel would send someone else, someone more dangerous than Diego and his men, but this time she wouldn't be facing them alone. Michael had taught her well, and his brothers-in-arms were coming. The cartel was about to learn a harsh lesson about the bonds between Marines and the true meaning of semper fidelis, always faithful. Jorge El Cazador Ramirez sat in the back of a black Escalade, methodically cleaning his custom-made Desert Eagle as his team drove through the darkness toward Mariposa. Unlike Diego's failed attempt, this operation would be different. Jorge had spent the afternoon studying satellite imagery of the town, memorizing every alley and escape route around the flower shop. He had also dispatched scouts to monitor Emma's movements, building a detailed picture of her routines. "The woman has training," he told his men, his voice carrying the distinctive rasp of someone who had survived a throat wound. But training alone isn't enough against superior numbers and firepower. His team consisted of 12 men, each chosen for their expertise in urban combat. They had 4 vehicles, high-powered rifles, and enough explosives to level a city block. As they drove, Jorge reviewed the intelligence gathered on Emma Martinez. The photos showed a woman of medium height, with dark hair usually pulled back in a practical bun. She moved with the awareness of someone who had been well-trained, but Jorge had eliminated former Special Forces operators before. A widow with some Marine combat training didn't worry him. Meanwhile, at Martinez Flowers Gifts, Emma was conducting her own preparations with military precision. Jake Stevens had arrived an hour earlier with 4 other former Marines, all members of Michael's old unit. They moved through the shop with practiced efficiency, evaluating sight lines and setting up defensive positions. "Michael always said you were a quick study," Jake commented as he watched Emma check the feed from her surveillance cameras. The gruff former Marine had aged since she'd last seen him, grey threading through his beard, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "He'd be proud to see how you handled those cartel thugs." Emma nodded, touched by the words, but staying focused on their preparation. "They'll send someone worse next time," she said, pulling up thermal imaging feeds on her laptop. "Someone who won't underestimate me like Diego did." "That's why we're here," Jake replied, gesturing to his team as they worked. "Marines take care of their own. Michael was our brother, which makes you our sister." The other Marines nodded in agreement, their movements precise as they transformed the quaint flower shop into a fortified position. The team consisted of Jake, who had been Michael's spotter during their sniper operations, Chris Rodriguez, an explosives expert, Sarah Chen, their communications specialist, and twins Marcus and David Thompson, both close-quarters combat experts. Each brought years of combat experience and a deep loyalty to Michael's memory. "They're watching us," Emma said, noting movement on her thermal feeds. 3 observation points: the coffee shop across the street, the apartment building on, the corner, and the parking garage 2 blocks south. Jake leaned in to study the footage, impressed by her attention to detail. "Good eye," he commented. "Michael taught you well. They're probably gathering intel for a night attack." He turned to his team. "Chris, how are we looking on the surprises?" Chris grinned, holding up a detonator. "Remember those tricks we used in Fallujah? I've got something special planned for any vehicles they bring. They won't know what hit them." He had spent the last hour rigging the approaches to the shop with carefully concealed devices, not lethal, but more than capable of stopping vehicles and disorienting attackers. Sarah was setting up their communication network, ensuring they could coordinate even if the cartel tried to jam their signals. "I've got us running on encrypted frequencies," she reported, "plus redundant systems if they try to cut power or..." phone lines. The Thompson twins had transformed the shop's interior using the heavy display cases and reinforced counters to create defensive positions. Flowers and plants were strategically rearranged to conceal weapons caches while maintaining clear fields of fire. Emma touched Michael's dog tags, drawing strength from them as she had so many times before. Michael always said the best defense is making the enemy regret attacking in the first place. She pulled up another screen, showing the surrounding streets. If they're watching us, let's give them something to think about. Jake understood immediately. A show of force? Emma nodded, a grim smile forming. Exactly. Let them see they're not dealing with just one widow anymore. Let them see what they're really up against. The Marines moved into visible positions, making no attempt to hide their presence or their capabilities. Let the cartel's observers report back about the reinforcements, about the professional way they moved, about the obvious military bearing they carried. Michael used to say that half of winning a fight is convincing your enemy they've already lost, Emma said, checking her weapons one final time. The Glock felt familiar in her hands, but now she also carried Michael's old M4 carbine, modified, for close-quarters combat. As night fell completely, the shop's exterior lights cast stark shadows across the street. Emma and the Marines took their positions, each covering specific sectors of fire. The waiting game had begun, but this time Emma wasn't alone. She had Michael's brothers and sisters in arms beside her, ready to remind the cartel why Marines were considered the world's finest warriors. "They're moving," Sarah reported suddenly, noting multiple vehicles approaching on different screens. Jorge and his team had begun their advance, but they were about to discover that their superior numbers meant nothing against Marines defending one of their own. The night air crackled with tension as Jorge's convoy approached Martinez Flowers, and gifts from multiple directions. 4 black SUVs moved like predators through the darkened streets, their headlights off, relying on night vision equipment. Jorge sat in the lead vehicle, his scarred face illuminated by the dim glow of tactical displays. His intel team had reported the arrival of reinforcements, but that only made him more determined. This wasn't just about a protection racket anymore. This was about sending a message. "Remember," Jorge's raspy voice came through the radio, "we take them alive if possible. Vargas wants to make an example of them." His men acknowledged with quiet affirmatives, their weapons ready. They had done this dozens of times before, neutralizing resistance, crushing those who dared to challenge the cartel's authority. Inside the flower shop, Emma watched the approaching vehicles on her thermal cameras. She stood beside Jake at the main counter, Michael's M4 carbine held ready. The shop's interior was now a carefully prepared kill zone, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback positions. The sweet scent of flowers mixed incongruously with the oil of cleaned weapons and the tension of impending combat. 4 vehicles, 3-man teams each, Sarah reported from her position at the surveillance station. "They're using a standard cartel tactical approach, boxing us in from all directions." Her fingers flew over the keyboard, tracking each target. Jake's voice was steady as he issued orders through their encrypted communications. "Chris, start the music when they hit your first marker. Thompson twins, watch those blind spots. Remember, they'll try to breach from multiple points simultaneously." The Marines moved with practiced efficiency, years of combat experience evident in every motion. Emma felt an odd calm settle over her, the same feeling Michael had described before. "Combat. They're crossing the first line," she announced, watching the thermal signatures approach the hidden sensors. The cartel teams were moving cautiously, but they had no idea what they were walking into. The first sign that something was wrong came when the lead SUV's engine suddenly died, followed quickly by the others. Chris's modified EMP devices had done their work, temporarily disabling the vehicle's electronics. Confusion rippled through the cartel ranks as their carefully planned approach ground to a halt. "Welcome to the party," Chris muttered, triggering the first set of defensive measures. Powerful strobes hidden in the surrounding buildings suddenly blazed to life, their disorienting patterns designed to defeat night vision equipment. The cartel members stumbled, ripping off their now useless tactical goggles. Jorge cursed, switching to backup plans. "Move in now," he ordered, and his men began advancing on foot. But as they approached the shop, the ground itself seemed to turn against them. Carefully concealed pressure plates triggered waves of pepper spray and smoke, creating a chaotic environment that negated their numerical advantage. The Thompson twins opened fire first, their suppressors keeping their positions, hidden as they picked off the most aggressive attackers with non-lethal rubber rounds. The impacts wouldn't kill, but they delivered enough force to take targets out of the fight. Cartel members dropped, crying out in pain and confusion. Jorge proved why he was the cartel's elite enforcer. Despite the chaos, he quickly identified the defensive pattern and began coordinating a more measured response. "Groups of 3, alternate coverage. Find me a clean line of sight." His remaining men regrouped, using their disabled vehicles as cover. Emma watched through her scope as Jorge directed his men. "That's their leader," she said to Jake, "the one with the throat scar. He's good. He's adapting." Jake nodded, recognizing the tactical skill of their opponent. This wasn't going to be as easy as Diego's attempt. The cartel's return fire intensified, bullets shattering windows and splintering wood. But Michael's reinforcements had held, and the armored panels hidden behind the shop's walls absorbed most of the impacts. Sarah maintained a running commentary of enemy positions, while Chris prepared to trigger his secondary defensive measures. "They're setting up for a coordinated breach," Emma observed, noting the pattern of movement. "Multiple entry points, just like you said." She touched Michael's dog tags once more, drawing strength from them. The cartel was about to learn another lesson her husband had taught her: the difference between attacking a building and attacking a prepared marine position. Jorge's voice carried across the battlefield as he rallied his men for the breach. "Go! Go! Go!" Teams of cartel gunmen rushed forward, throwing flashbangs and preparing to storm the shop from 3 directions. But Emma and the Marines were ready. "Chris, light it up," Jake commanded. The explosives expert grinned and triggered his next surprise. The ground between the attackers and the shop erupted in a choreographed sequence of flashbangs, smoke grenades, and other non-lethal deterrents. The cartel's coordinated assault devolved into chaos as men stumbled and fell, their attacks becoming uncoordinated and ineffective. Emma lined up her first shot carefully, just as Michael had taught her. Through the scope of her M4, she found Jorge directing his men from behind cover. The shot wasn't meant to kill, just to send a message. She squeezed the trigger, and the round caught Jorge's cover inches from his head, spraying him with concrete fragments. The cartel enforcer's eyes widened as he realized this wasn't the simple enforcement action he had expected. This was war, and he was fighting Marines. Jorge wiped blood from a cut on his forehead where the concrete fragments had struck him, his expression darkening with rage. No one had ever come this close to hitting him, not in all his years of enforcing the cartel's will. He keyed his radio, his raspy voice tight with controlled fury. "Change of plans, forget taking them alive, burn it all down." Inside the shop, Sarah's voice cut through the tactical channel. "Multiple attackers repositioning. They're breaking out heavier weapons." Through the cameras, Emma could see cartel members retrieving equipment from their disabled vehicles, including what looked like incendiary devices and heavy explosive charges. "They're getting desperate," Jake observed, moving to a better firing position. "Good. Desperate men make mistakes." He had seen that truth proven countless times during his tours with Michael. The Thompson twins maintained steady suppressing fire, keeping the cartel forces pinned down while Chris prepared for the next phase of their defense. Emma's mind raced through Michael's lessons. When the enemy escalates, they often overlook their flanks. His voice echoed in her memory. She quickly scanned the thermal feeds, noting how the cartel's forces had begun to cluster, focusing solely on the front of the building. "Jake, they're leaving their right side exposed, just like Michael always said they would." Jake nodded, immediately understanding her thinking. "Marcus, David, shift your fire left. Keep them bunched up. Sarah, get ready to kill the streetlights on my mark. Chris, time for that special surprise you mentioned." The explosives expert's grin was visible even in the dim light as he pulled out a specialized remote. Outside, Jorge was coordinating his men's new positions, unaware that he was playing directly into the Marines' strategy. "First team, prepare to lay down suppressing fire. Second team, move those charges into position. Third team, get the incendiaries ready. We'll give them nowhere to run." Emma watched through her scope as the cartel members began their movement. The moment they committed to their new positions, she keyed her radio. "Now!" The street plunged into darkness as Sarah killed the power to the entire block. Simultaneously, Chris triggered his special surprise, a series of specialized crowd control devices he'd adapted from his military days. The devices detonated in a carefully choreographed sequence, filling the street with a devastating combination of sound, pressure waves, and disorienting lights. The effect on the clustered cartel members was immediate and devastating. Men stumbled and fell, their coordination shattered by the assault on their senses. Emma and the Marines executed their counterattack with precision born of countless hours of training. They emerged from multiple pre-planned positions, their own night vision, equipment giving them a crucial advantage. The Thompson twins moved like shadows, systematically disarming and neutralizing disoriented cartel members with practiced efficiency. Jorge, however, proved why he was the cartel's elite enforcer. Despite the chaos, he managed to rally a small group of his men, creating a defensive position behind their disabled vehicles. "Hold your ground," his voice carried over the confusion. "Return fire! Don't let them—" His words cut off as a precisely aimed shot from Emma's M4 struck the engine block inches from his position, spraying hot oil across his face. "Your men are down." Emma's voice carried across the battlefield, steady and confident. "Your vehicles are disabled. You've lost your advantage, and you're running out of options. Stand down, or the next shot won't miss." She had him in her sights, Michael's training guiding every movement. Jorge's response was to raise his weapon, squeezing off several rapid shots in Emma's direction. But she had already moved, just as Michael had taught her. "Never stay in one place after revealing your position." His words guided her actions. Her next shot caught Jorge's weapon, sending it spinning from his hands. The remaining cartel members, seeing their leader effectively neutralized, began to waver. One by one they dropped their weapons, raising their hands in surrender. The Thompson twins moved quickly to secure them, their movements precise and professional. Jake approached Jorge, his own weapon trained steadily on the cartel enforcer. "You made a serious mistake coming here," he said, his voice cold. "This isn't just a flower shop. This is a Marine's legacy, and we protect our own." Emma emerged from cover, Michael's M4 held ready as she walked toward Jorge. The cartel enforcer stared at her with a mixture of rage and disbelief. How had a simple widow and a handful of veterans completely destroyed his elite team? "Tell Vargas what happened here," Emma said, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that Michael's had. "Tell him that Martinez Flowers and Gifts isn't just protected by one widow. It's protected by the United States Marine Corps. If he wants to continue this fight, he should understand what that means." The sound of approaching sirens filled the air, their pre-arranged signal with local law enforcement finally arriving. As red and blue lights began to flash in the distance, Emma touched Michael's dog tags one last time. The night's battle was over, but she knew the war with the cartel might not be. Yet standing there, Surrounded by her husband's brothers in arms, she felt no fear. Michael had prepared her for this, and she would not let his legacy fall. Alejandro Vargas stood at the window of his hacienda, his reflection ghostly in the pre-dawn glass as he listened to Jorge's report over a secure line. His knuckles whitened around the phone as he heard how his elite enforcement team had been systematically dismantled by a widow and a handful of Marines. The crystal tumbler of aged tequila on his desk remained untouched. This was a moment that required complete clarity. "Let me understand this clearly," Vargas said, his voice dangerously soft. "Not only did you fail to take control of the situation, but you also lost 4 vehicles, had 12 men captured by local police, and allowed our organization to be humiliated twice in the same week." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with tension. "They were prepared, Jefe." Jorge's raspy voice carried a note of uncharacteristic uncertainty. "The widow, she's not just trained, she has support. Former Force Recon Marines. They had the whole area rigged with defensive measures we've never seen before. Enough!" Vargas cut him off. "I don't want excuses. I want solutions." He turned from the window, pacing across his expensive Persian rug. "This woman and her Marine friends have made us look weak. In our business, weakness is death." His mind was already racing through the implications. Other businesses in the territory would hear about this. They might start getting ideas about resistance. In the small safe house where Jorge and his remaining men had retreated, the cartel enforcer felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. Not of Vargas's anger, but of the efficiency with which his team had been defeated. The Marines had operated with a level of precision that went beyond normal military training. They had anticipated every move, countered every strategy. "What are your orders?" Jorge asked, dreading the answer. Vargas was silent for a long moment, considering his options. Finally he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Bring me everyone," Vargas commanded. "Every enforcer, every shooter, every asset we have in the region. If they want to make this about military strength, we'll show them what a cartel army looks like." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And Jorge, don't fail me again." Meanwhile, back at Martinez Flowers Gifts, Emma and the Marines were conducting a thorough after-action review. The shop showed signs of the battle. Broken windows, bullet holes in walls, scattered debris, but the core structure remained sound, protected by Michael's reinforcements. "They'll come back," Jake said, cleaning his weapon with practiced efficiency. "And next time they'll bring an army." The other Marines nodded in agreement, their faces serious in the early morning light. They had won this battle decisively, but none of them were naive enough to think the war was over. Emma stood at her planning table, Michael's tactical notebook open beside her laptop. "Then we'll be ready," she said, her voice steady. "Michael didn't just teach me how to fight, he taught me how to win." She pulled up satellite imagery of the surrounding area, her mind working through scenarios just as her husband had taught her. Sarah, monitoring their surveillance network, suddenly straightened. "We've got movement." Multiple vehicles leaving known cartel locations throughout the region. They're mobilizing. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, tracking the activity. "This is bigger than anything we've seen before." The Thompson twins exchanged looks before. Marcus spoke up. "We should call in more support. There are other Marines who would come. Michael had friends all over the Corps." David nodded in agreement, already pulling out his phone. "No," Emma said firmly, her hand resting on Michael's dog tags. "We can't put more people at risk. This is my fight." She looked around at the Marines who had already risked so much to help her. "You've all done more than enough." Jake stepped forward, his expression stern. "With all due respect, Emma, that's not your call to make. Michael was our brother, which makes this our fight too. Marines don't abandon their own." The others voiced their agreement, their loyalty to Michael's memory evident in every word. Emma felt a surge of emotion, remembering how Michael had always spoken about the unbreakable bonds between Marines. She looked down at the tactical notebook, at her husband's precise handwriting, outlining strategies for exactly this type of situation. "All right," she said finally, "but we do this smart. We do this Michael's way." Chris grinned, already pulling out his explosives kit. Michael's way usually involved making the enemy regret ever starting the fight. He began laying out equipment, his expert hands moving with purpose. "I've still got a few surprises they haven't seen yet." As the Marines began their preparations, Emma opened a hidden panel in the shop's back room, revealing a cache of equipment that even her allies hadn't known about. Michael's final preparations, his last gift to ensure she would never be defenseless. Among the weapons and tactical gear was a sealed envelope with her name on it, written in his familiar handwriting. "For when all other options are exhausted," the envelope read. Emma broke the seal, her heart pounding as she unfolded the letter. As she read Michael's final contingency plan, her eyes widened. Her husband, even in death, had found a way to help her deliver a killing blow to the cartel's operations. The coming battle wouldn't just be about defending a flower shop. It would be about ending the cartel's reign of terror once and for all. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she read Michael's letter, his final message written in the precise handwriting she knew so well. The other Marines gathered around her, their expressions growing more intense with each line she read aloud. Michael hadn't just left her tactical training and defensive measures, he'd left her the means to destroy the cartel completely. "During my last deployment," Michael had written, "my team uncovered evidence of the cartel's entire operation. Banking records, shipping routes, corrupt officials, everything. I couldn't move on it then. Too many politics, too many compromised officials. But I made copies, encrypted everything, created a dead man's switch that would activate if anything happened to you." Jake whistled low. Classic Michael, always thinking 3 steps ahead. He remembered how methodical his friend had been, how he'd always prepared for every contingency. "What's the trigger?" Emma continued reading, her voice steady despite the weight of the revelation. "The evidence is stored on secure servers around the world. One call from you, Emma, one predetermined phrase, and it all goes public. Every law enforcement agency, every media outlet, every government official not on their payroll gets everything. The cartel's entire empire burns." "That's why he trained you so thoroughly," Sarah said, understanding dawning on her face. "He wasn't just preparing you to defend yourself. He was preparing you to be his fail-safe, his insurance policy against the cartel ever threatening his family." Oh. The Thompson twins were already moving, checking weapons and reinforcing positions. They knew that if Emma held this kind of power, the cartel would stop at nothing to eliminate her before she could use it. "How much time do we have?" Marcus asked, his eyes on the surveillance feeds. "Not long," Sarah replied, her fingers flying over her keyboard. "I'm tracking multiple vehicles converging on our location. They're mobilizing everything they have." The screens showed convoy after convoy of cartel vehicles moving through the region, all heading toward Mariposa. Chris was examining the letters, technical details, with professional interest. "Michael didn't just give you a nuclear option," he said, looking up at Emma. "He gave you a precision weapon. This evidence. It's not just about Vargas and his local operation. This would take down their entire network right up to the top." Emma touched Michael's dog tags, feeling closer to him than she had in years. Even now, he was protecting her, fighting alongside her. "There's more," she said, turning to the final page. "Coordinates, numbers, meeting locations." She looked at Jake, her eyes hard with determination. "He left us everything we need to hit them first." Jake studied the information, his tactical mind already forming plans. "These are their staging areas, They're safe houses, places they think are secret. He smiled grimly. Michael's giving us the chance to take the fight to them before they can mass their forces against us. No, it's risky, Emma said, remembering Michael's lessons about offensive operations. If we leave the shop, we lose our prepared positions, our home field advantage. But even as she spoke, she knew what Michael would say. Sometimes the best defense is a devastating offense. Chris was already pulling out his specialized equipment, laying out tools that would turn the cartel's own safe houses into death traps. We can rig their staging areas before they fully mobilize, make them fear their own bases. His eyes gleamed, with professional appreciation for Michael's forethought. Split into teams, Jake decided, taking command with the ease of long experience. Chris and David, you take the north staging areas. Marcus and Sarah handle their communication hubs. Emma and I will deal with their command center. He looked at each of them in turn. Michael gave us this chance. Let's make it count. Emma moved to the shop's hidden armory, selecting weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Each piece had been chosen by Michael, each one familiar from countless hours of training. As she strapped on her tactical gear, she felt a fierce pride mix with her grief. Michael hadn't just been preparing her to survive. He'd been preparing her to win. One more thing, she said, pulling out a final piece of equipment Michael had left her. It was a small drone, specially modified for reconnaissance and electronic warfare. Michael called it his guardian angel, said it would watch over me when he couldn't. Sarah's eyes lit up as she examined the drone's specifications. This isn't just surveillance equipment. This thing can hack their communications, jam their signals, feed them false information. Michael really did think of everything. As the team made their final preparations, Emma looked around at the flower shop, her sanctuary turned fortress. Soon they would take the fight to the cartel, but something told her that this place would see one final battle before the day end. Michael had known it too. His letter's final words proved it. When the time comes, mi amor, make them regret ever threatening what we built. Show them what happens when they mistake a Marine's widow for an easy target. But most importantly, remember that I am always with you, always watching over you. Semper Fi. Emma folded the letter carefully, tucking it next to her heart. The sun was rising over Mariposa, marking the beginning of what would be the final day of the cartel's power in this region. Michael had given her everything she needed, the training, the tools, and now the perfect weapon. It was time to use them all. The pre-dawn darkness shrouded the cartel's main staging area, a seemingly abandoned warehouse complex on the outskirts of town. Guard patrols moved between shadows, their movements betraying their military training. Deserters and mercenaries hired for their combat experience. They were professional, alert, and completely unaware of what was about to happen. Emma and Jake watched from their concealed position half a mile away, using Michael's high-end thermal imaging equipment to track patrol patterns. The warehouse was coming alive with activity as Vargas's men prepared for their assault on the flower shop. Vehicles were being loaded with weapons, and teams were gathering for briefings. Just like Michael's notes said, Jake whispered, checking the coordinates. One more time. Their main armory is in the east building. Command and control in the center, communications hub in the west. He kept his voice low, though they were well outside patrol range. Sarah, how are we looking on their security systems? Sarah's voice came through their encrypted comm channel, clear and professional. Michael's drone is working perfectly. I've got access to their cameras and security grid. They're blind where you need them to be. There was admiration in her voice for Michael's technological preparations. Thompson teams are in position at the other locations. Chris is ready with his surprises. Emma checked her weapon one last time, feeling the comfortable weight of Michael's modified M4. Time to make them regret ever coming to Mariposa, she said, her voice cold with determination. She touched the dog tags at her neck, then nodded. To Jake. Let's move. They advanced through the darkness with practiced stealth, using the approach routes Michael had mapped out years ago. Emma moved like a shadow, each step placed with precision, just as Michael had taught her. The cartel's perimeter security was good, but Michael had known all their standard protocols, all their weaknesses. The first guard never saw them coming. Emma moved in close, using the hand-to-hand techniques Michael had drilled into her countless times. A quick strike to the throat, an arm lock, and the guard was unconscious before he could make a sound. Jake secured him with zip ties as Emma took his radio, syncing it to Sarah's monitoring system. "Control, this is Post 4, all clear," Emma transmitted at the prescribed check-in time, her Spanish perfect and unhurried. Sarah had already modified the radio to match the guard's voice signature. Inside the compound, nothing seemed amiss. They breached the perimeter through a maintenance tunnel Michael had documented, emerging inside the compound's blind spot. The warehouse complex was now fully awake, humming with pre-mission activity. Through their thermal imaging, they could see dozens of armed men preparing for what they thought would be an overwhelming assault on a simple flower shop. "Thompson teams are in position," Marcus reported through the comm. "Ready to initiate. On your mark." At the other cartel locations, similar scenes were playing out as Michael's carefully laid plans came to fruition. Emma checked her watch, synchronized with all teams. "Execute in 3, 2, 1. Mark." The night erupted into carefully orchestrated chaos. At every cartel staging area across the region, Michael's plans were set in motion. Chris's surprises detonated first, not explosions, but a series of specialized devices that filled the armory with a fast-acting sedative gas. Through their thermal imaging, Emma and Jake watched as cartel members began dropping unconscious. The few who managed to get masks on found their communications suddenly filled with contradictory orders, courtesy of Sarah's electronic warfare. "West building secured," David reported. "Communications hub is down. They're cut off from outside support." The precision of the operation would have made Michael proud, each team executing their part flawlessly. Emma and Jake moved toward the command center, where thermal imaging showed frantic activity as cartel leaders tried to understand what was happening. They had expected to be the hunters, never imagining they would become the prey. "Remember what Michael taught you about clearing buildings," Jake said as they approached the command center. Emma nodded, recalling countless training sessions where Michael had drilled her on CQB, close-quarters battle techniques. The door guards went down silently, precise shots from suppressed weapons dropping them before they could raise the alarm. Inside, they could hear panicked voices as reports of multiple simultaneous attacks flooded in from every cartel facility in the region. Emma touched her radio, her voice cold and clear as she transmitted on all cartel frequencies. "This is Emma Martinez. You came to my shop, threatened my life, tried to destroy everything my husband and I built." She paused, letting the fear sink in. "Now you learn why that was a mistake." As if in response to her words, the entire compound plunged into darkness as Sarah killed the power grid. Emergency lights flickered weakly, creating disorienting shadows. Through their night vision gear, Emma and Jake watched the thermal signatures of cartel members scrambling in confusion. "Remember," Jake said quietly as they prepared to breach the command center, "Michael's plan isn't just about taking them down. It's about sending a message that will echo through every cartel operation in the country." Emma nodded, her grip tightening on her weapon. The cartel was about to learn exactly what it meant to face a Marine's legacy. The command center erupted into chaos as Emma and Jake breached the entrance. Their night vision gave them a perfect view of the panicked cartel leadership, scrambling in the darkness like trapped rats. Through the green haze of their goggles, they could see Jorge barking orders, his scarred face twisted with rage as he tried to regain control of the situation. "Status report!" Jorge's raspy voice carried through the confusion. "Someone get the backup generators online. Where are our security teams?" But his commands were met with only static. Sarah's electronic warfare had rendered their communications useless. The cartel's carefully constructed command structure was crumbling. Emma moved with lethal grace, every motion a testament to Michael's training. She took down 2 guards with precise shots, the suppressed M4 barely whispering in the darkness. Jake covered her advance, his own movements equally efficient. They had practiced this countless times. Michael had made sure Emma knew every aspect of CQB operations. "Chris, status on the armory?" Emma whispered into her comm as she took cover behind an overturned desk. The explosives expert's voice came back, tight with professional satisfaction. "Primary weapons cache is secured. They won't be arming reinforcements anytime soon. Thompson teams report similar success at other locations." Jorge, proving his reputation as the cartel's elite enforcer, hadn't lost his combat instincts despite the chaos. "They're using our blindness against us," he shouted to his remaining men. "Form a defensive perimeter back to back. Use sound and movement to track them." His training was showing. He understood tactical situations even when surprised. But Michael had prepared for this too. Emma reached into her tactical vest and pulled out one of his special devices, a sound projector that could throw voices and noises in different directions. She activated it, sending phantom footsteps and whispers echoing through the darkened room. The cartel members spun in confusion, firing at shadows. "Your men can't help you anymore." Emma's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, thanks to the device. "Your weapons are gone. Your communications are down. Your escape routes are blocked." She moved silently to a new position as she spoke, just as Michael had taught her. "This is what happens when you threaten a Marine's family." Jake had worked his way around the room's perimeter, systematically neutralizing any cartel member who strayed too close to the walls. His movements were silent, efficient, the result of years of special operations experience. Through their tactical network, Emma could see his position marked on her heads-up display. Another piece of technology Michael had left her. "Show yourself!" Jorge snarled into the darkness, his composure finally cracking. "Face me like a warrior, not hiding in shadows." His remaining men were pressed together in the center of the room, jumping at every sound, their weapons pointed uselessly into the black void around them. Emma's response came in the form of action. She triggered another of Michael's devices, this one producing a disorienting strobe effect that their night vision gear automatically compensated for. The cartel members, already struggling with the darkness, were completely overwhelmed. "Now!" Jake's voice came through the comm, and both he and Emma moved simultaneously. Years of training with Michael had taught Emma the importance of synchronized attacks. They emerged from different directions, their weapons finding targets with mechanical precision. The remaining cartel guards went down in seconds, leaving only Jorge standing. The cartel enforcer showed his experience, managing to fire off several shots despite the strobing lights. But Emma had anticipated this. Michael had taught her that the most dangerous opponents always saved something for last. She was already moving as Jorge's bullets passed through where she had been standing. "Impressive," Jorge admitted into the darkness, his gun tracking movement. "The Marine taught you well, but you're still just a widow-playing soldier." He was trying to draw her out, make her angry, force a mistake. But Michael had prepared her for psychological warfare too. "No," Emma replied calmly, her voice now coming from directly behind him. "I'm a Marine's wife, and you're in my kill zone." Before Jorge could turn, she struck. The move was perfect. A combination of CQB techniques Michael had drilled into her until they became instinct. Her rifle stock caught Jorge in the back of the knee, dropping him to the ground. A precise strike to his weapon arm sent his gun skittering across the floor. Jake moved in smoothly, securing Jorge with zip ties as Emma kept him covered. The cartel enforcer looked up at her, finally seeing her clearly as Sarah restored power to the command center. The room was littered with unconscious or restrained cartel members, the entire command structure of their local operation neutralized. In minutes. "This is Emma Martinez," she transmitted on all cartel frequencies, her voice carrying the authority Michael had helped her develop. "Your leadership is captured, your weapons are gone, your operations are exposed." She paused, letting the message sink in. "But this was just phase 1 of my husband's plan. You have 1 hour to clear out of Mariposa completely. After that, every piece of evidence he gathered goes public." Through her tactical display, Emma could see similar scenes playing out at every cartel facility in the region. Michael's plans, years in the making, had worked perfectly. The cartel's grip on Mariposa was broken, but Emma knew the battle wasn't over yet. Somewhere in his mansion, Vargas was learning of his operation's collapse. The final confrontation was still to come. In his luxurious hacienda, Alejandro Vargas stood in his private office, his customary calm shattered as reports of catastrophic losses flooded in from every facility. His entire operation, decades of carefully built infrastructure, networks and power, was being systematically dismantled by a widow and a handful of Marines. The crystal tumbler in his hand shattered as he clenched his fist, sending expensive tequila and glass shards across his imported marble floor. "How?" he demanded into his satellite phone, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "How did they know every location, every security measure, every fallback position?" His remaining lieutenants had no answers, only more reports of facilities falling, men being captured, and operations being exposed. "Sir," his security chief interrupted, bursting into the office without knocking, a breach of protocol that spoke to the severity of the situation. "We've lost contact with Jorge and the entire command center. Local police are moving in on our locations and—" He hesitated, knowing the news would enrage his boss further. "Federal agents are mobilizing. Someone leaked everything. Shipping routes, banking records, political connections. All of it." Vargas's face drained of color. This wasn't just an attack on his operation. This was an extinction-level event for his entire organization. "The Marine," he whispered, understanding dawning. "That dead Marine planned all of this. He left his widow a weapon more powerful than any gun, information." At the captured command center, Emma was reviewing Michael's files on her tactical tablet, while Jake coordinated with the other teams. The Thompson twins had secured the remaining cartel facilities, while Chris and Sarah worked to decrypt additional intelligence from the cartel's own servers. "Emma, you need to see this," Sarah called out, her voice tight with urgency. "We just intercepted communications from Vargas's compound. He's not running." She pulled up surveillance footage, showing intense activity at the hacienda. He's mobilizing everything he has left for a final strike. Emma studied the feeds, her mind working through the tactical analysis Michael had taught her. "He's desperate," she observed. "He knows his empire is falling, so he's going to try to take us down with him." She turned to Jake. "What would Michael do in this situation?" Jake's face was grim as he reviewed the intelligence. "Michael would say that a cornered enemy is the most dangerous. Vargas has nothing left to lose. He'll throw everything he has at us, no holding back, no concerns about collateral damage." He looked at Emma seriously. "We should call in law enforcement, let them handle it." But Emma was already shaking her head. "No, Michael's letter was clear about this. Vargas has too many corrupted officials on his payroll. If we don't finish this ourselves, he might find a way to slip away." She touched her husband's dog tags, drawing strength from them. "We end this tonight, on our terms. Thompson teams reporting in. Marcus's voice came through the comm. "We've got civilian police securing our captured locations. Chris has rigged everything with surveillance. No one's breaking those guys out." The precision of their operation would have made Michael proud. Sarah looked up from her computer station. "I've got complete access to Vargas's security systems. Michael's infiltration software is incredible. They don't even know we're in their network." She pulled up detailed schematics of the hacienda. "I can see everything they're doing, every preparation they're making." Emma studied the layout, remembering Michael's lessons about assaulting fortified positions. "They'll be expecting us, to wait, to let them come to us." A small smile crossed her face. "So we do exactly what Michael would do. We take the fight to them before they're ready." Jake nodded, understanding the strategy. "Hit them during their preparation phase, when they're focused on gathering forces rather than defending." He started marking positions on the tactical display. "We can use Michael's drone to—" He paused as Emma raised her hand. "No," she said firmly. "I need you and the others to hold our secured positions. Make sure none of the captured cartel members escape. Keep coordinating with local law enforcement." She stood, checking her weapons with practiced efficiency. "Vargas is mine." "Emma, that's suicide," Jake protested. "Even with all of Michael's training, you can't assault that compound alone. They'll have dozens of guards, security systems, defensive positions." Emma pulled up Michael's final tactical file on her tablet. "I won't be alone," she said softly. "Michael left me one last card to play." She showed Jake the screen, watching his eyes widen as he read the details. He knew it might come to this, knew I might have to take down someone like Vargas. So he left me everything I need, including how to infiltrate that hacienda through passages even Vargas doesn't know exist. Jake studied the plans with professional appreciation. These tunnels, they're from the original hacienda, before Vargas's renovations. Michael mapped everything. He looked at Emma with new understanding. He wasn't just teaching you to defend yourself. He was preparing you to take the offensive, to end threats permanently. Emma checked her gear one final time, making sure everything was secured. Michael always said that the best defense is a good offense. Vargas thinks he can wait in his fortress and strike at us. Time to show him how wrong he is. She touched the dog tags one last time, then pulled on her tactical helmet. "Monitor me through the drone, but this part I do alone, for Michael." The ancient tunnels beneath Vargas's hacienda were exactly as Michael's plans had shown. Emma moved silently through the darkness, her night vision revealing centuries-old stonework and forgotten passages. Michael had discovered these tunnels during his last deployment, mapping them meticulously while gathering intelligence on the cartel. Even now, years after his death, he was guiding her path. Above, she could hear the muffled sounds of Vargas's men preparing for what they thought would be their final assault on the flower shop. Through her tactical comm, Sarah kept her updated on their movements. "They're gathering in the main courtyard," the communications expert reported. "Vargas is in his office, 3rd floor, east wing. He's got 6 personal guards with him." Emma checked her tablet, confirming her position against Michael's mapped routes. She was directly beneath the hacienda's wine cellar, an area Vargas had converted into a secure storage room for sensitive documents and valuables. "How's their security looking?" she whispered into her comm. "Still blind to your approach," Sarah confirmed. "Michael's virus has their systems showing normal operations. They have no idea their cameras and sensors are compromised." There was admiration in her voice for Michael's technical preparations. Emma reached a section of wall marked in Michael's plans. To anyone else, it looked like solid stone, but she knew better. Her fingers found the hidden mechanism Michael had documented, a remnant of the hacienda's days as a revolutionary safehouse. The wall shifted silently, revealing a narrow passage into the wine cellar. The room was dimly lit and empty of guards. Why post security in a sealed room? Emma moved quickly to the modern security panel by the door, plugging in another of Michael's devices. Seconds later, the door's electronic lock disengaged. Michael had thought of everything, preparing tools and codes for every security system Vargas might install. "Movement on the second floor," Sarah warned through the comm. "2 guard patrols crossing the main hall." Emma waited, counting seconds as Michael had taught her, until Sarah gave the all-clear. She slipped into the hallway, moving like a shadow toward the service stairs Michael had marked as her best route up. The hacienda's interior was a testament to Vargas's wealth and power. Priceless art, exotic hardwoods, marble floors that could have betrayed her presence if Michael hadn't trained her so well in silent movement. She avoided the main staircase, using service routes and hidden passages to work her way toward Vargas's office. "Boss, you need to see this," one of Vargas's guards was saying as Emma approached the office door. Through her thermal imaging, she could see 8 heat signatures inside, Vargas and his security detail. "Our men at the staging areas. They're being loaded into police vehicles. Federal agents are on scene." "Impossible." Vargas's voice carried through the door, tight with rage. "I own half the federal agents in this region. Who authorized this operation?" Emma smiled coldly, knowing that Michael's evidence dump had forced even corrupted officials to act, if only to save themselves. It was time. Emma reached into her tactical vest and removed Michael's final surprise, a specially designed breaching charge that would incapacitate everyone in the room without causing permanent damage. "Sarah, kill the power to the East Wing on my mark," she whispered. "Ready," Sarah confirmed. "Thompson teams are in position to intercept any reinforcements. You've got a clear shot at Vargas." Emma took a deep breath, centering herself as Michael had taught her. Everything had led to this moment. "Execute," Emma commanded. The lights died instantly, plunging the hallway into darkness. Before Vargas's men could react, she placed the charge and moved back. The device detonated with a muffled thump, filling the office with a disorienting combination of flash, smoke, and sonic pulses. Emma breached the door in full tactical gear, her night vision giving her a perfect view of the chaos within. Vargas's guards were staggering, their equilibrium shattered by Michael's device. She moved through them like a ghost, neutralizing each with precise strikes to pressure points Michael had drilled her on countless times. Vargas himself had stumbled behind his desk, trying to reach a hidden weapon. Emma was on him before he could grasp it, sweeping his legs and driving him to the marble floor. "Do you know who I am?" she asked coldly, pinning him down with techniques Michael had taught her. "The Marine's widow!" Vargas spat, his composure finally breaking. "You think this changes anything? I still have resources, connections. I'll rebuild everything you've destroyed." But there was fear in his voice now, fear of a woman who had systematically dismantled his empire in a single night. Emma secured his hands with zip ties, her movements precise and professional. "No," she said quietly, "you won't. Michael didn't just leave me evidence of your current operations. He left me everything, your contingency plans, your hidden accounts, your secret properties. It's all being exposed as we speak." Through her comm, she could hear Sarah confirming that federal agents were entering the hacienda grounds, drawn by the evidence Michael had collected. But they wouldn't find Vargas in his office. Emma had one last mission, one final part of Michael's plan to execute. Dawn was breaking over Mariposa as Emma stood in front of Martinez Flowers Gifts, watching federal agents escort the last of Vargas's men into custody. The events of the night had transformed the quiet town forever, but as the morning sun cast its warm glow over the flower shop's sign, she felt a profound sense of peace. "You should have seen their faces at the federal building," Jake said, walking up beside her. "When we presented Michael's evidence, when they realized the scope of what he'd uncovered, He shook his head in amazement. Even the corrupt officials couldn't bury it. There were too many honest agents seeing it all at once. Emma touched Michael's dog tags, remembering how he'd always believed in preparing for every possibility. "He knew it would take more than just fighting to end this," she said softly. "The cartel's power wasn't just in their weapons or their men. It was in their connections, their ability to operate in the shadows." Sarah emerged from the shop, her laptop tucked under her arm. "The last of Michael's data dumps just went public," she reported. "News agencies worldwide are picking up the story. The evidence is spreading faster than they can contain it." She smiled. "No one can stop it now." The Thompson twins were supervising the cleanup of their defensive positions, erasing any trace of the previous night's battle. "Local police just confirmed," Marcus called out. "Jorge and his men are being transferred to a secure federal facility. No chance of escape or rescue." Chris joined them, his expert hands already itching to rebuild the shop's damaged sections. "We can have this place back to normal in a few days," he offered, "though I vote we keep some of the defensive improvements. You never know when they might come in handy." Emma smiled, remembering how Michael used to say that preparation was never wasted. She looked around at these Marines, her husband's brothers and sisters in arms, who had come when she needed them most. "Thank you," she said simply. "All of you. Michael would be proud." "He was always proud of you," Jake replied, his gruff voice softening. "Used to talk about you all the time during deployments, how smart you were, how quickly you learned everything he taught you." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "He knew, knew that someday you might need to fight this fight." Emma nodded, walking into her shop. The interior still showed signs of battle: broken glass, bullet holes, overturned displays, but underneath the damage, she could see the bones of what she and Michael had built together. "Help me with something?" she asked the Marines. Together, they cleared the debris, straightened the displays, and began restoring order to the chaos. As they worked, Emma shared stories about Michael. Not the warrior they had known, but the man who had found peace among the flowers, who had poured his love into building this place with her. He used to say that flowers were like people, she told them, arranging a fresh bouquet of roses. Some are delicate, needing protection and care. Others have thorns, ready to defend themselves. But all of them, with the right support, can bloom even in harsh conditions. The morning progressed, and gradually the shop began to look like itself again. Customers would soon return, life would go on, but everything had changed. The cartel's shadow no longer loomed over Mariposa, and Emma had proven that she was far more than just a widow with a flower shop. As the Marines prepared to leave, each heading back to their own lives, Jake handed Emma a small package. "Michael left this with me," he explained. "Asked me to give it to you after everything was done." Inside, she found a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photo showed her and Michael on the day they opened the shop, both smiling, full of hope and dreams. The note, written in his familiar hand, was simple but profound. "Mi amor, if you're reading this, you've done what I always knew you could do. You've proven that love doesn't end with death, that a Marine's legacy lives on through those we train and protect. I am so proud of you, my warrior flower girl. Live well, love deeply, and know that I am always with you. Semper Fi." Emma hung the photograph in a place of honor behind the counter, next to Michael's Medal of Honor. She touched the dog tags one last time, then began preparing the day's flower arrangements. Outside, Mariposa was waking up to a new reality, one where good people didn't have to fear, where justice had prevailed over corruption. A customer entered, the bell chiming just as it had countless times before. "Good morning," Emma greeted them with a genuine smile. She was still Michael's widow, still the keeper of his flower shop, but now she was something more, a warrior in her own right, a protector of the peace he had died defending. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the fresh flowers and making them glow. Life would go on, bringing new challenges and joys, but Emma was ready for whatever came next. Michael had taught her well, not just about fighting, but about living, about protecting what matters most. And in the quiet moments between arranging flowers and greeting customers, she could almost hear his voice, proud and loving. Semper fi mi amor. Always faithful, always strong, always blooming, despite the thorns. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.